Views expressed by CamaPlan podcast guests may not reflect those of CamaPlan. CamaPlan does not guarantee the accuracy of information provided by guests, nor does it endorse or recommend any individual or organization. CamaPlan is not an investment advisor, CPA, realtor, or attorney. You are encouraged to conduct your own due diligence before making investment choices. For any tax, legal, accounting, investment, or other questions, please consult a specialist. Hi, I'm Michael Duncan, and welcome back to The Road to Financial Freedom. This podcast is brought to you by CamaPlan, a self-directed IRA administrator focused on educating investors on how to grow retirement savings faster through alternative investments. In each episode, we're going to take an in-depth look at the many roads taken to financial freedom and how they differ for each of our guests. Our goal is to help the listeners learn how they can achieve their own financial freedom through the experience and stories of experts that have done just that. Today's guest is a leading expert in money management with a focus on helping women break free from paycheck-to-paycheck cycle and start building wealth. Her and her husband were able to pay off over $111K in debt on 2 teachers' salaries while still growing their family. From the classroom to full-time CEO of Inspired Budget, she has been able to help thousands of women learn to budget, pay off debt, save, and invest for their future, while also recently becoming a published author. I'm very excited to welcome Allison Baggerly to the show. Allison, how are you doing today?
I am really excited to be here. I have my coffee, I have my ADHD medicine, my kids are at school, the house is quiet, so I'm happy mom.
I am right there with you, not the mom part. And not the kids part. The ADHD medication, I'm good. I don't drink coffee. I drink water, but I've got that. So we are 2 peas in a pod here. Again, minus the kids.
I love it. Minus the kids. Yeah.
Yes.
What about a dog? Do you have a dog?
Oh, I have a dog. I do indeed.
Oh, I have a dog too. He might make a scene if there's a threatening car that drives by, but other than that, he should sleep.
That's his job. I mean, you can't ask him to not do his job, so I totally get it. My dog hates driver-bys, passer-bys, dogger-bys too, so I get it. Mine's at home though, so she will not be interrupting at all.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm very excited to get to talk to you. Obviously, you have a book that just came out. I would love to start there. Could you just tell me, before we get to your history and all that, I guess, what inspired you to write a book in the first place?
Oh my gosh, I never thought I would write a book, to be honest. I'm very much a speaker and less of a writer, I feel like. And honestly, Wiley Publishing Company reached out to me and they were like, listen, we've been following you. We know your story. We want you to write a book. And I was like, are you sure? Like, come on, guys. Like, is this an April Fool's Day joke? It wasn't, because it was November. And so I thought about the process and I actually wrote the book, but I did it by dictating it. So I spoke a lot of the book. That's how I got around some of my writer's block. But truly, it's the book that I wish I had about 11 years ago when I was first starting with money. I didn't learn about money. My parents didn't teach me about money because they were just trying to learn about money on their own. And, you know, back then, before the internet, it was truly a privilege to know how to manage your money, how to invest, how to just make it all work, make this big puzzle piece and put it together. And I left home not equipped with that information. And so I found myself as an adult just kind of flailing about, and I needed guidance, and I kind of picked it up here and there. And so then I took everything that I wish I had known and I put it inside this lovely book.
I think flailing is a very strong word, a very good word. I can relate to that very much. But that's awesome. I mean, it's clear, obviously, that you've figured it out enough to write a book. I can't imagine learning enough about money and about how to save and do all that. And I guess maybe I shouldn't be saying that as a host of this podcast, but I can't imagine learning that much about it enough to fill a book. And it's, you know, if you're not watching, it's a pretty thick book. You know, this is no, it's not, you know, just a simple little thing. Like, there's a lot of information in there, I can tell.
It is, yes. And it's called Money Made Easy. I didn't say that. But it is. And it's very much, you know, I didn't just like wake up and think, oh, I can be an author. This was years and years in the process of trying different things and making mistakes and figuring out what works for me and my family, because we're all unique and different. And putting it all in this book, I literally thought, how am I going to fill the pages, 78,000 words, of a book. I'll have nothing left. And I finished the book. I was in the editing process and I was like, there's no way I could ever write another one. Like, there's absolutely no way. There's nothing else I have to say.
Yeah.
And then one day, my second book idea came to me and I was like, do I hate myself? Do I want to go through this again? How could I find something else to write about? But who knows? Stay tuned to see if another book will come. But for the time being, Money Made Easy is out and it's available anywhere you can buy books.
Except Target.
Except Target, unfortunately. Target, contact me, please. Thank you.
Yes, hopefully the CEO of Target is listening to this podcast.
Oh, I know they are.
If that's true, please hit me up too. I'd love to do a sponsorship or something. So
exactly.
But that being said, let's go back a ways. You mentioned it a little bit, kind of how this journey started. Could you go a little more into detail, I guess, about, I mentioned that you started as a teacher. How did you get here? It's not something that I think was probably spelled out for you in college. A very alternative way of getting here. So I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, this was a total just like sidetrack, random path that I came down. Like there's like this fork in the road. I didn't even know that the left-hand turn was an option and I took it, kind of forged my own path. But I used to not be good with money. I love, and I still to this day, I love spending money. I get a high from spending money. There is a euphoria. There is a sense of like freedom when I spend money, which is probably not what people are thinking I'm going to say on a money podcast. However, that's my truth. In the past, I used money as a way to, we all turn to things. We all have vices. Mine was money. I was an emotional spender when I was happy, when I was mad, glad, sad, bored, you name it. I would either enhance my emotions by spending money or run away from my emotions and my problems by spending money. And I found myself recently out of college as an elementary school teacher. And I met my husband, my husband now, but I met my husband. And he's a band director, so he's also a teacher. And we fell in love, never had a conversation about money, never talked about it because he had debt, was probably ashamed. I could care less about the topic. I wanted to spend and spend and spend. And we got unexpectedly pregnant on our honeymoon. It was a shock to us. At the age of 24, I got married, got pregnant, and had a baby, all at the age of 24. And that was a big change in our life. Yeah, yes. So we got pregnant, came back from the honeymoon, realized, oh my gosh, this was not expected, was attempted to be prevented. And we realized at that moment, we were sitting in this little small 2-bedroom apartment. I'm so happy we splurged for the 2-bedroom, by the way. We were sitting,
I bet.
we were sitting at this small kitchen table that had been handed down from my parents with these mismatched IKEA chairs. And we were looking up the cost of daycare. And it was mind boggling. It was going to be an extra $800 to $900 a month back then. And that was 11 years ago.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that much money left over every month. There was no $800 or $900. So there was definitely no way I could quit my job and stay home. So that wasn't an option. And then the other option, we couldn't afford daycare. We didn't live near family. We had no support nearby. So we said, okay, we have 9 months, really more like 8 months. We've got to find money. We have to free up enough cash flow every month to be able to afford daycare payments. And very reluctantly and just kicking and screaming, dragging behind. I mean, I was like, okay, my husband was like, we need to do a budget and pay off some of this debt. And I was like, okay, I will do it, but only for this period of time. I will commit to this until we are debt free. And after that, I will never write a budget again. Like, don't ask me to do it. I'm not going to do it. And so we started this process of really understanding our finances in general, seeing exactly what we were spending money on because we didn't know that before. Realizing we had over $111,000 of debt, which we had never added up before, and learning how to write a budget that allowed us to pay off that debt while trying to live a life that, as much as we could do with ended up being 2 young kids in daycare. And during that 4.5-year process as 2 teachers, it changed who I was. I thought it was going to be this Band-Aid, but I realized that I loved the peace of mind and the sense of control, knowing that I knew exactly where my money was going and I had a say in where it went. And so by the time we paid off all of that debt, I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't stop talking about this. I can't stop talking about budgeting. I can't stop talking about personal finance and how it impacts us as people and working alongside with a spouse or a partner. And so I started Inspired Budget, and I worked 2 jobs. I was a young mom. I was a teacher, and I started this business on the side. And within 2 years, I was able to leave teaching and work on Inspired Budget full time.
So you lied, is really what I took away from that. You lied when you said, I will do this for these 8 months and then never again.
I lied to myself, but don't we always lie to ourselves? Like, always. I'm not going to have that second piece of cake, you know, like, I've
given up on lying to myself about that, if I'm being honest.
So, you know, but it all worked out. It was honestly just like this very beautiful life journey, because Michael, when I tell you that 11 years ago, I would literally pray. I would pray like, somehow, like, let me win the lottery, even though I don't buy lottery tickets, or let me like somehow come into all of this money and be able to erase this problem. And that obviously didn't happen, but working through that problem led me down a path that I never expected for myself, to be an entrepreneur, to own my own business, to give me the time freedom that I wanted. And all of that to say, my book is actually coming out today. We're recording this on April 4th. And today is my first son's 11th birthday. So it's very much, it's very much this full circle moment, because he was truly like the catalyst for us to change our life. And then it all led to this book being released on his birthday. And I did not choose the date. That was my publisher's.
Well, first of all, I got you on an incredible day. This was not on purpose, but
no.
I got very lucky. So go me, and really you who chose the date, but congrats. Thank you for that. Wow. So yeah, that was a lot.
Sorry.
A lot of no, not bad at all. Trust me. The listeners don't want to hear me. They want to hear me ask you questions so you can talk about your experiences. And your experiences, that was a lot in a good way. I'm 26, about to turn 27. I can't imagine even now, let alone when I was 24. Granted, it was during COVID, but I can't imagine going through that type of life change and the stress and the anxiety that had to come with that. And especially, you mentioned it, and I can relate to it as someone with ADHD, like making those types of active choices to change the way that you do things is really hard.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Especially for someone who literally saw money as an escape for years. I mean, when I tell you that this was not a straight line, this was like a freaking roller coaster for me. I was on like the Velocicoaster. I don't know. I just went to Universal with my son, and it was an amazing roller coaster. But this was a roller coaster of life. You know, there were moments when we had major setbacks. There were moments I was the major setback, because I would kind of just binge spend, almost like reactionary. And it wasn't this straight line, but it was incredible to see that even with backwards progress overall, forward progress can be made with money. Whether you are paying off debt, whether you are trying to invest and the stock market is a shit show. Sorry, can I cuss here?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. even when that happens and you great. Even when that happens and you feel like, oh my gosh, am I making mistakes? And we start letting our emotions kind of interact a little bit, you can still make forward progress, even though it's not going to be a straight line.
Absolutely. So speaking of that forward progress, that straight line, at what point, because obviously it wasn't right away, but at what point did this become something that you realized could be a full-time job? It could be your livelihood, where, you said, okay, I don't need to teach.
Oh, well, that's a fun story. So I'm going to admit this to you, Michael, and I have not admitted this to a lot of people.
Well, and all my listeners. So.
And all your listeners, yes. Yeah. I decided, first off, I think it's ridiculous that we expect children at the age of 18 or 17 to decide what they want to do with their life.
Agreed.
Like, I think that is the worst thing. So I decided when I was maybe 16 years old, I'm going to be a teacher. Like, I'm surrounded by teachers. I have a teacher I like. Hey, Miss Paralysis is cool. Like, I'm going to be like her. I'm going to be a teacher. So I graduate high school. I go to college. I go through 4 years of school, and I'm in my student teaching, and I'm in the last semester, fully in the classroom. And I was like, I don't know if I like this. Like, is this what I want to do the rest of my life? But I was like, you know what? You took out student loans. You made it 4 years. We're not going back to square one, Allison. And I pushed ahead with teaching. And here's the deal. I'm a great teacher. It is a skill set, it is a talent of mine. But every year around February, I came back to this question of what am I really supposed to be doing? And I would stay up till 2:00 in the morning Googling, right? Late night, everyone's sleeping. My mind is racing. I'm Googling what to do with an education degree because I didn't want to go back to college. I was like, I don't want to go into debt. I don't feel like dealing with that. I need to transition somehow. But I couldn't figure out what that next step was. I also wanted freedom. I wanted it all, which is maybe selfish, but don't we all want it all?
No, I mean, if you don't want it, you're not going to get it.
Exactly. Like I wanted the ability to have summers off with my kids and kind of the same schedule. And so I continued to stay in the classroom because I was talented at it. I was great at it, but I wasn't always happy and went through, my first maybe 6 years of teaching. We had paid off our debt, and every Easter we go to my grandma's house and we have a big crawfish boil. They live in Louisiana. That's when I see all of my extended family, like my cousins. And we were there one Easter, and my cousin-in-law, Janet, my cousin's wife, we were talking, and I was like, oh yeah, we paid off our debt. And like, here's what we're gonna do next and all this stuff. And she looked at me and she said, Allison? And I said, yeah, Janet, what? She said, shut up. I was like, what? And she was like, every year you come with the same thing. You talk to us about the same thing year in and year out, and we are tired of it. You need to take this message. You are clearly passionate about it, and you need to start something else. Like, you need to talk to the people who need to hear you. And I was like, that was kind of rude. And she was like, you should start an online business. And I immediately thought, I don't even know how to do that. I don't know. Is that possible? Like, what does that look like? She's like, I don't know, but you can't be coming back here every year, like spewing the same thing. And 2 weeks later, I bought the domain Inspired Budget, stayed up till 2:00 in the morning with my mom and my husband, bouncing around business names, saw it was available, bought it, and said, okay, I'm going to figure this out. And what started as a blog turns into a healthy following on social media. And I started working with brands. I started coaching people. And within about 2 years, I had replaced my teaching income. And that was kind of my goal. I said, I just want to be able to replace that. And so really within a year and a half, but I finished out that school year and haven't looked back since.
Wow. I mean, it must have felt very rude in the moment, but that definitely changed the trajectory.
It did. And I remember thinking like, but why me? I mean, there's already Susie Orman and Dave Ramsey and all these people. But she said, not everyone wants to listen to them. And I was like, you're right. Sometimes I don't want to listen to them most of the time. So she was like, you don't have to have, the whole world's attention. You just need people that are several steps behind you and that you can help and guide. And so now I have a membership with over 1,000 women in it, course sales. I work with brands, and it's been a wonderful transition for our family. Now, not to say that it was easy. It was terrible. When I was doing all of it, when I was teaching and working on my business, I was getting no sleep. I was abandoning everything else in my life, and it was not a way to live. So something had to give. And my teaching job is the thing that we cut out.
I'm assuming part of you kind of knew that was hopefully a temporary solution.
It was. Exactly. I set a goal to replace my teaching income in 5 years. I did it in 2, but to be honest with you, Michael, I did it in 2 at the expense of my marriage was hanging on by a thread. My kids were never seeing me. Like, it was rough. It was rough. I could not have made it 5 years. There's no way. Yeah. So it was very much this very difficult and fast and furious growth until I reached this point where I was just unhealthy in every aspect of my life.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in therapy, and it was like, I couldn't keep doing it all. And so my husband and I decided to take the leap that I would leave teaching. I had a quit teaching fund. I had money set aside in a savings account called Quit Teaching. And we just kind of said, like, okay, we can get ourselves through the next 6 months. Like, let's do it. Let's jump on this train. And he still had a consistent income. I mean, it's a teacher's income, so it's not great. We can't just live off of his income alone, but it was still having some sort of steady income coming in, made it feel a little bit more secure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that makes total sense. So your business in general, you advise, you mentor a lot of women. I'm assuming in similar situations to what you were in.
Mm-hmm.
Why? And the answer may seem obvious, but why women?
I knew you were going to ask that. Well, there's not a lot of women out there doing this. There's a lot of white men guiding people, and it's one thing to follow someone that doesn't look like you. It's something something completely different to follow someone who you feel like has walked in your footsteps before. So I'm also half Hispanic, so I'm Latina, and that also, I mean, you just don't have enough of that. And when Wiley reached out to me to write the book, I was hesitant. I was like, this sounds like a big project, and I have ADHD, and I've been known to not follow through on big projects like this. Like, that is a gift of mine. And I called my friend Bola Shakumbi from Clever Girl Finance, and she said, absolutely do it. And I said, Bola, like, why? Like, why should I do it? And she said, for every 100 male authors, there's one female. And it's even worse when it comes to personal finance books. Like, we need more women authors. We need more, just the voice of females out there. And that's why I really speak truly to females, because there's enough men out there speaking to men. And I get it. Like, a lot of times you want to be guided by someone that looks like you, that talks like you, that thinks like you. And so that's my aim. My aim is not to speak to every single person out there. And I'm okay if people are like, oh, I don't like her message, or I don't resonate with her. That's great. I don't want to resonate with everybody. I want to resonate with women who want something different for their lives and maybe have never learned about how to manage money, or they've always been told that managing money is not for them, or investing is not for them, and getting them started to build a foundation with their finances that helps them feel confident, empowered, and take action with their money.
So first of all, I think that goal is incredible.
Thank you.
I think that's an awesome goal. My mom was always, and I think I grew up in a very different situation, at least as I've realized as I've gotten older. My mom was the one who kept track of our budget. She kept track of our finances. She did everything. Love my mother very much. So that was always very normal to me. And my dad, I see your dog now. My dad was always, not that he didn't know what was going on, but my mom was so type A in general that he was very much willing to just say, hey, yeah, I got you, whatever. And as I got older, and I did realize that wasn't very typical. And I think that's very supported by everything you just said. So I guess
I want to say something real quick, because I don't want to come off as being like the person who is advocating for women do it all and women are better at managing the money. It's not that at all. It's that I think that two heads are better than one. Yes. So in a partnership, no matter what that partnership looks like, I think both people should have a hand and a say in the money. And I think so often, just traditionally and historically, and what we may have learned from our own family history, is that it falls to the men. And to that I say, what a burden to carry. What a burden to carry, to be the one that feels like they have to make all the decisions and all of it weighs on them. Like, it shouldn't all weigh on one person. And I realize in many families it does, but it really shouldn't.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's very well said. So speaking of that family, I guess, atmosphere, I don't know if that's the word I'm looking for, but you grew up, you didn't really know a lot about keeping finances, keeping a budget. How are you changing that within your own household moving forward?
Oh my goodness, so many ways. Now, I do need to tell you that I know in some way I'm screwing up my kids. Like, I am very well aware that I am screwing up my kids. My kids' relationship and experience with money is just a complete 180 of my experience and relationship with money from my childhood. And I know that in some way my parents screwed me up with that, and I'm doing something completely different. And I know that the chances of me screwing them up is also, high. I mean, it's going to happen because I'm doing something that I didn't experience as a child. So we started at a very young age just talking openly about money. My husband is a very calm and level-headed person. He doesn't ever get really excited, but he doesn't ever get really mad. I'm kind of more of the roller coaster of a person. And so we can have conversations about money around the children without arguing or yelling or fighting. So we've always had open conversations around our kids. We'll hang our budget on the wall or on the refrigerator. We will do that. We will discuss it at the table, at the kitchen table or at the dining table while we're eating dinner. Our kids will ask us about spending, and I'll say like, oh, we didn't allot for that this month, but maybe we can add that next month. However, I will say that it has backfired in some ways because we talk about money so much.
Yeah.
I almost think that I'm giving my oldest son some sort of like anxiety around money because we talked about it so much, which is, so I'm seeing it and I'm like, oh, like there's anxiety surrounding money because we talk about it so much, and we don't talk about it in this negative way, but it's just that it is a discussion for our family weekly. And my husband and I will openly talk about it in front of our kids. So while there are so many wonderful things that can do, I'm now seeing that can also have negative impacts in the sense of like, he's constantly thinking about money and worried we don't have enough. And as an entrepreneur, there's ups and downs in your income.
Always.
And there are times where he's like, are we okay? And I'm like, we're okay. Like, I promise you, we're okay. And that has been interesting. But in terms of like actually teaching money, we personally use Greenlight. I'm like, it's not an ad or anything. I pay for Greenlight. And it's basically both of our kids. I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old. They have a debit card and they receive a weekly allowance as long as they do their weekly chores on the weekends. And it is automatically separated in percentages, what I choose, 70% to spending, 20% to saving, and 10% to giving. And then they can go on their app on their iPad, or my oldest son has a phone, and he can go on the app and they can see how much money they have. I've even started teaching my oldest son, who's 11, how to invest. And so you can invest in the Greenlight platform. Yes. So he has a little brokerage account that he's been investing in, and he can kind of see that it goes up and down. And the other day he was like, the stock market's down. And I was like, it's okay, don't worry about it. But to just kind of see that, actually he said the stock is down. That's what he said.
Hey, I mean, I think he might already be more knowledgeable than I am on the stock market.
So, but it's just a really great way for them to learn to separate their money and to be intentional about it. And another great thing is you can give through that platform, so you can connect to all different types of giving. So we could look, my youngest son, we were looking and he said, I want to give to something for the environment. So you can narrow down charities based on topics. So by pets, so it's really incredible. And it allows me to say when they're like, Mom, I want this, or Mom, I want that. We live in a very entitled world. We live in a very now life. And it allows me to say, well, if that's something you want, then you're welcome to set up a savings goal in Greenlight. You're welcome to set up a savings goal, or you're welcome to check to see how much money you have in your spend account if that's something you really want to buy. And so it's been a really cool process. I've kind of let go of the pressure of making sure my kids leave this house like perfect. I just want them to know, look, know how much you make, spend less than what you make. Don't like credit card debt is terrible. Avoid that high interest debt, and don't put off investing. Like start investing as soon as you possibly can. That's pretty much what I want them to learn throughout the years. and to send them out into the world knowing those kind of just basic concepts.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, wow. I mean, it's very interesting. Again, not a parent. I was raised in a generally, aware of money household. Nothing like that. And I think that's incredible because I think the number one thing, again, not a parent, have no experience being a parent, but the number one thing.
Like, as a parent expert, now I have a parent, which makes me an expert.
That's true. I do. Yeah, but like I think it is fascinating that, money is so often viewed in a household as something that should be kind of kept away from kids a lot of the time. And not, in the terms of, allowance and all that, but like it is something that you don't want them to worry about. And there's good reasoning for wanting to do that. You want to shield them from it. You want to protect them from the worry and the anxiety of it all, because that is very real. Money is it can be a very scary thing. But I think the more that it's normalized and the more that it is talked about in front of them, the more they can realize that, hey, it doesn't have to be this terrifying thing. Like buying something doesn't have to be horrifying. Like, obviously they need to understand the difference between, they need to have a healthy respect for money. I guess.
Exactly. A healthy fear. Yes. I think that that's so true. And I think also that it really helps that my husband and I can have a very healthy conversation about it. Now, if there was arguing and yelling and screaming, like I don't want to do that around my kids. Yeah. So I understand why if you do have a partner that is not on board, or if you're a single parent, that is hard. However, here's an example of just a very easy way you can have a conversation about money. My son, we live in a very affluent area, way more affluent than I ever grew up in. And it has been like a culture shock for me. And I worry about my kids. I'm like, this is not the real world, guys. Like, this is not what it's really like out there. And I remember like some of my friends, they buy their kids Christmas gifts and they spend $1,000 on each kid. And I'm just like, that's just not how I grew up. That's not how I grew up. That's not how I want to spend money. And so this past Christmas, my son just flat out asked, like, why is it that other kids in school or some of my other friends get way more Christmas gifts than I do? And I just said, listen, Dad and I, we are saving for your college. We are saving for retirement. We are investing for retirement. We are trying to be very mindful about our money. And so while you might not get to, $1,000 Christmas gift, which I think is just crazy, but maybe that, obviously like $1,000 to each their own. $1,000 to one person is completely different to $1,000 to another person who's making 10 times as much.
True.
But I said, listen, like that is something, but you don't know what those other parents are doing. Those other parents might not be saving money for retirement. They might not be doing that. But our goal is that whenever we are older, you don't have to take care of us because we have saved money. We're not going to have to go to you and ask for money. We're not going to have to go to you and ask you to help us out because we have saved in advance. And so we try to just have those conversations and then just say, like, I know it doesn't seem fair, but there are people that are getting less than you. And this is life. It's about making choices. And these are the choices we're making. We're choosing to save for your college expenses or higher education expenses. We're choosing to save for retirement. And we're trying to make sure that we don't overspend and go into debt during Christmas.
Absolutely. I mean, it's incredible to be able to have those conversations with your child. I mean, I'm sure that, and I mean, again, I don't have kids. I have a couple nieces and nephews that I've kind of watched grow up and I'm pretty close with. And it's very interesting having not been a child for a long time, or at least that level of a child, but seeing the level of understanding that they have for very real world things when they're given the opportunity to understand those things. And I think you're giving them the opportunity to understand these things. You're not assuming that they won't. And I think, from what I can tell, it's clear that they are validating your choices to help them understand that.
Well, that and just realizing that it can be a very vulnerable experience as well. It can be very humbling to go to tell your child, like, we can't afford this because of this, especially if you have debt, especially if there's any guilt associated with your reasoning, right? That can be really hard to say, like, we're not going to take a family vacation to Disney World because we're trying to pay off credit card debt. And that is a very vulnerable conversation to have with someone that you feel like you're supposed to be guiding. You're supposed to be like, have the right answers all the time. But the more we can have these conversations with our children and explain to them, we've set these goals, whatever that goal might be. So we have to make sure that our decisions every day align with those goals. That means that there are going to be trade-offs. And that's the way I see it, is there are trade-offs. I would much rather choose to drive, I have a paid for in cash, this little Kia that's not very fancy. It's not special. Like, it has a backup camera, which was my number one request. And I'd rather do that and be able to invest in, for retirement, to where my husband will be able to retire actually in like 12 years as a teacher at the age of 52. I know. And I'm like, I want to have the option to be done working then, which means that we're investing a lot more right now. Yeah. And it's just about making those trade-offs. So having those conversations with kids, it can be very vulnerable when there is guilt associated with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure guilt is probably the number one thing that you probably are worrying about when it comes to those types of things. And, I don't blame you. It's tough. Whenever you can feel as if your kid is guilty for existing, I guess at that point is kind of what it is. Like, you don't want them to feel that way. No,
gosh, I hope not. No, I hope not. If that's the case, maybe we all go to therapy as a family.
It's true. Therapy's great.
Therapy is great.
I love therapy. So, Allison, we've talked a lot about your family, your past, your history, how you've gotten to where you are, and it's incredible. I've learned a lot, and I think that what we're going to do is have another episode, hopefully next week, where you can tell us more about your investing, your time as an entrepreneur, and some of the things from your book, why people, what they can learn from buying that book about how to successfully kind of manage your money as an entrepreneur. So before we leave real quick, feel free to tell the listeners where they can find you and why they should tune in next week.
Of course. So you can find me. I mean, if you're listening to a podcast, I have a podcast, Inspire Budget Podcast. So check it out. You can find me on Instagram at Inspire Budget, inspirebudget.com. And you can get my book anywhere books are sold, Money Made Easy. Be sure to grab it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for listening. And as always, please support the podcast by remembering to rate, review, and subscribe. You can keep up to date with us on Facebook or Instagram at Road to Financial Freedom Podcast. Thanks again, and I will see you next week with the second half of this conversation with Allison Baggerly. So I will see you then.